is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Darren Adam.
Good morning. Friday morning, it's the 4th of October. This is LBC, leading Britain's conversation. I'm Darren Adam with you. Dr. Lisa Palmer is a psychotherapist and family therapist, and she joins me on the line now. Lisa, good morning. Thank you very much for your time.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can we start with whether this actually works? If you are a parent and you smack your child, does the child learn anything useful from that?
Well, maybe in some cultures it works, but I look at everything, Darren, from a PTSD perspective, because my center, as you know, was rated #1 in the U.S. for treatment of trauma. So I look at everything from that perspective, and when I'm fixing people, I'm fixing a lot of their traumas. So you see a lot of traumas happening from the time that people are born, and these traumas are defining them. So they're shaping their personalities, they're shaping the way that they behave, their core belief systems, their emotions. And so I think this is a really important topic that we're talking about here.
Okay. Now, we're going to get lots of calls, I suspect, from lots of people. And I welcome them, by the way, from people who say, I was smacked as a kid and it never did me any harm. There'll be a lot of what you might call empirical evidence of smacking being at least harmless. How much attention should we pay to that?
Well, I'm not looking at things from a legal perspective necessarily. I'm looking at things from the psychological and the emotional perspective.
Well, indeed. But what I'm saying is, when we have listeners call, as we will, saying that they were smacked as children and it did not do them any harm, how much weight should we attach to those personal experiences?
Right. Well, everybody has their own personal experience, different sensitivities. So just because something affects you in a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to affect me in the same way. However, we can actually see that there are certain types of behaviors, certain types of experiences that may have a similar effect amongst a group of people. And when you are smacking your child, what you're doing is you're creating a situation that's putting that child in danger, okay, mentally, physically, and emotionally, because the brain actually processes trauma memory different than regular memory. So what this would mean is that the child might be scared, confused, might develop a core belief system that they're unheard. Obviously, they're fearful, frightened, and they remain frozen. Many people can remain frozen in that experience, and that experience can carry on with them through the course of their life.
Okay.
Finding the next moment and the next moment and the next moment.
And can that follow from, again, I imagine this will be an example that someone will give us if they're trying to protect, as they would see it, their child from doing something dangerous. They don't have time to explain why electricity is dangerous, or don't have time to explain why, running across the road is dangerous. If chastisement is used...
Right. From the parent perspective, the parent might have their own rationale as to why they're doing that behavior.
Right.
But the person that's on the receiving end is not really rationalizing it that way, because when you're experiencing a trauma, you're going into a state of survival. So you're not thinking about the reasons behind the actions of the other person. You're just responding from an emotional perspective regarding what just happened. Okay. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, but absolutely it does. But to a parent who hears that and says, well, I'd rather take the risk of that than have my child run over by the car or electrocuted or whatever the risk happens to be. Again, I'm not a parent, Lisa, so I've never been in the position of having to make that decision.
I mean, you do raise a really good question in terms of how you balance the needs from the side of the parent versus the possible potential impact on the child. It's a dicey issue, but I think that with this bill being passed, they're trying to err on the side of caution for those people that may have been abused themselves, that think that this is okay behavior to discipline a child that way. And we need to try to find other, maybe more productive ways, and more ways that are more humane and sensitive.
Well, that's maybe something, that's maybe something we can get into across the rest of the conversation. But, I mean, what are the alternatives then to smacking for parents that have used this, not just as a way of chastising or punishing, but as a way of warning and protecting, perhaps? What are the I guess, the non-violent alternatives?
You know, the rewards and other kinds of punishments that wouldn't be violent, time out,
Yeah.
speaking calmly, getting your child to respect you, which is really important for a parent to be able to do that. If you raise your voice at a child too often, then they become desensitized to that. You know, kids can develop a desensitization to smacking as well. So it's like they will develop a threshold to tolerate that. And then at some point, it's not even that effective because their coping mechanism might be numbness. So they become numb to it. It becomes part of the usual. So then what happens would be that the parent would have to escalate the behaviors to try to have the same effect on the child. And that's not good either.
And do you see in your role as psychotherapist and family therapist, do you see that actually respect for the parent can in fact fall away as a consequence of being hit or physically chastised?
Absolutely. I think that, you know, fear and respect are two different things. So a child might pull back or follow along with what the parent is saying because they're scared, but still not necessarily respect their parent as somebody that they can trust. Does that make sense?
It does, and I'm very grateful for your time this morning, Lisa, and I want to hear what everyone makes of this. And again, it's unusual to kind of come into a conversation without an absolutely firm view on it. Maybe I'll have assembled one by the end of the conversation. Lisa, thank you very much for your time this morning. That's Dr. Lisa Palmer, psychotherapist and family therapist, joining me this morning here